I'd like to start by asking, did you enjoy Choose Your Own Adventure game books as a child? Do you like a good pen and paper RPG? And were you read to as a child, perhaps by parents, guardians, or maybe older siblings? If your answer is yes to any of those questions, then you have something in common with us. But I think you'll like what I'm about to show you. My name's Josh, and I'm the team leader and project manager of Found the Foul Mouths. Also in this team, we have Jean, who's our technical lead. We have Matt, who's our art designer. We have Lewis, who's our user researcher and prototyper. And we have Ollie, who's our Unity expert. Introducing our concept. Today, I'm going to show you our binaural branching Grimm narrative. Think of a digital game book retelling of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales with a touch of ASMR. I'm going to briefly explain what binaural sound and ASMR are. For binaural sound, I quote Hammershøi and Müller. The term binaural technique is used as a cover label here for methods of sound recording, synthesis and reproduction, where the signals in focus are the acoustic signals at the eardrum. If these are presented authentically to listeners, the listeners will obtain acoustic cues which are deemed sufficient for authentic auditory experience, including its spatial aspects. End quote. What that essentially means is binaural audio is sound that has been recorded, produced or simulated in a way that makes it feel authentic, i.e. it reaches the user's ears in a way that feels true to real life. For the effect to be achieved, users should have headphones on. Now typically, binaural recording equipment is really expensive, but what we've been able to do is use Unity's Audio Spatializer SDK to recreate it at minimal cost. Now, ASMR, or the Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, is often described as a tingling sensation elicited by audiovisual stimuli. The specific stimuli that triggers ASMR can vary from person to person, but typically ASMR creative content involves soft speaking and near-to-ear binaural sound. Long before I knew what ASMR was, I remember having that exact tingling feeling when I was being read to as a child. To support our decision to build our experience around the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, I'd like to share a quote from Howlett et al. Old stories reappear in one generation after another, in new languages, new forms, new styles. Literature is a participatory democracy, and the people, not the scholars and critics, determine which stories are resurrected. The stories of Dracula and Frankenstein seem to have more lives than the monstrous creatures which they portray. End quote. Just last year, a horror film by the name of Gretel and Hansel was released. Granted, it had mixed reviews, and horror films in themselves do fit a niche audience than, say, a superhero blockbuster. It still grossed 22 million worldwide from a budget of 5 million. I think that suggests that Howlett's quote rings true. The people still want to hear these classic stories, and whilst they're in the public domain, we are free to retell those stories in our own unique style. Now, I also want to give a nod to the Fighting Fantasy gamebook series. Our whole team have really fond memories of playing through those gamebooks as children. Now, they were published by Puffin between 1982 and 1995, but in 2017 Scholastic acquired the rights to the Fighting Fantasy series, and as recently as October 2020, they published 2 new Fighting Fantasy books to the line. I think that shows that there's a market for this type of storytelling. My last honourable mention is Telltale Games. They've built a genre and a business model around branching narratives. Granted, they went defunct in 2018, but they were really quickly reacquired and relaunched under LCG Entertainment. Taking a look at their website, they have an extremely active community forum where people discuss upcoming titles, review games, and even role-play their own storylines. I think that alone suggests that there is a really keen market for this kind of branching narrative game. Okay, I've rambled enough now, so without further ado, I'm going to show you our pre-production prototype. Now, this uses our synthesized binaural sound, so if you haven't got any headphones on, pause now, go and grab them, and then come back as quick as you can.
It's a solitary living out here atop the hill. Your mother lived in this very cabin, and her father before her. Some way up your family tree, an ancestor built the cabin. logs harvested from the forest it watches over. Generations come and go. Branches of your family tree inevitably fall. The cabin and title of forest keeper are inherited. The trail ahead winds off to the left, and it'll keep you in the woods for longer than you'd like. To the right, through the break from which you can see the town, the grass seems trodden. It could be a shortcut. Do you trust the path you know, or the one a stranger has laid for you?
Knowing our market. Okay, I need to address the elephant in the room, Bandersnatch. In 2019, Netflix was sued by Chooseco, the company behind the Choose Your Own Adventure series, for infringing on the Choose Your Own Adventure trademark and also inflicting reputational harm because the two IPs were so easily associated. We actually use the phrase branching Grimm narrative as a means of navigating ever using Choose Your Own Adventure in a commercial context. Bandersnatch also divided critics, and a common complaint was the choices that the user was being presented with in the show weren't actually meaningful, and really they were just following a staccato linear story. To demonstrate how we've avoided that pitfall, I want to tell you about one of the encounters in our story. So at a certain point, the protagonist will be wandering through the forest and they'll come across a signpost with two signs on it. Now the sign to the left is totally decayed and illegible, but the path itself seems like a familiar route. And the sign to the right distinctly says to town, but it seems to be made of gingerbread. Now, if the user decides to take their protagonist down that path on the right, well, they'll encounter Hansel and Gretel and they'll find themselves at a witch's cottage. And if they go down the path on the left, well, they'll experience a different fairy tale entirely. Our earliest user research revealed a desire for meaningful choices in interactive experiences, and I believe that we've satisfied that requirement. And that leads me nicely onto my next talking point of defining who our users actually are. I won't read the whole persona out on the screen now, but I encourage you to pause this presentation and have a read for yourself. But really quickly, our users tend to be readers. They tend to be consumers of creative media, particularly audiobooks and podcasts. They tend to be people who enjoyed game books as children and are seeking that nostalgia, or perhaps they're enjoying them now and they just want more content. Critically though, they're not necessarily indie gamers. Our user research revealed three main ways that our users engage with creative media. The first was the immersive engagement, and that was when the user was totally focused on the creative content they were consuming. Second was varying engagement, and that was when they were paying attention to the content, but they were doing something else at the same time, maybe commuting or working out or doing something that's maybe a little bit mundane. The last one was passive engagement, and that's when they had the content on but weren't particularly paying any attention to it. Maybe they had it on as background noise to cut out other distractions from the world, or perhaps they were using it to fall asleep too. Our product successfully caters for all three of those use cases. Production wireframes. What you can see now are wireframes for the full production of our product. We're showcasing our accessibility options here because we've designed our entire product from the ground up with accessibility in mind. For language and cognitive barriers, we've included variable playback speeds and an array of subtitle options. We've got audio panning for individuals with unilateral hearing loss, and for individuals with bilateral hearing loss, we still have on-screen text, so they can experience the full story even without the binaural audio. We've got audio cues at the decision points for visually impaired users, and for individuals with full hearing and visual impairment, they can still interact with the product using a compatible braille display. A plea for investment. Right, brass tacks. We would like £25,000 in return for a 10% stake in our business. So that's $20,000 to afford our pre and post launch strategies, and then a further $5,000 for our digital marketing efforts. Walk in the Woods is going to be a free app, but it's going to pave the way for paid apps to come. Once we've established our user base with this first product, we'll be able to price our following products according to the market. By the way, feel free to hit pause on the next few slides to read our Gantt charts in detail. We're ready to enter production phase now. So over the next 4 months, Jean and Ollie will be handling all of the programming, and they have over 30 years of development experience between them. Matt will be finalising the UI and providing any other artwork assets that are required for the process. And Lewis and I will be arranging the marketing events and conducting playtesting. And that will take us up to the final release date of the 21st of December, assuming everything goes to plan today and we actually secure our investment. The following 4 months after that date will be where most of our marketing ramps up. So Lewis and I will be attending the activities and events that are on the screen now, and the rest of the core team will be focused on producing bonus content, seasonal content, and rolling out any patches that might be required after launch. It's also worth noting that over this 8-month period we will be working without a salary, so we'll be making our return at the same time as our investors. Thanks for your time.